Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello and welcome to the last episode of season on thriving in relationships. I can't believe we're at the end of the season, but what a great episode rundown that we've had this entire time. We've had so many great experts on. We've had Tracy and I bantering about topics, but all in the vein of really how to thrive in relationships. And so for this last episode, we're going to do something kind of unique and interesting. It just so happened to be that on a Facebook group that we're in, there was someone that posted a question during the recording time of this entire season that said, what does thriving in relationships look like to you? And all of these people responded and put these posts on Facebook about what they thought thriving in relationships looked like to them. And so what we did is we took the responses and we sort of clustered them into themes, and we found some real key themes about what other people say thriving in relationships looks like to them. So we're going to share those themes with you today, share some of the quotes from these folks that made their posts online, and give us a chance to kind of talk through them and how much these themes are important in our lives as well. So much fun, Tracy, to be here to really kind of end the season with this.
Yeah. And I want everyone to know the truth that you did all this. I had nothing to do with it. We did not go through this. You did it. You did all the work here. So you should get all the credit. You went through, I'm just looking through now, like how you took all these people's questions. You're like AI. You're like a living AI. Because I use AI notes for my client meetings, and I'll never, ever not do a client meeting on Zoom because it organizes them. It takes my client meetings are all over the place. And when I get the notes back, I'm like, wow, that was a great meeting. And that's what you've done. Like literally you're a living AI.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll take it. That's a compliment. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot to go through because a lot of people had some things to say about this, but wow, they really bucketed it out into some clear themes over and over and over again, which is great. Some of them I hadn't really even thought about. We hadn't even talked about on this, in the entire season. So this will be great to talk about. Some of them are, basically just affirmations or validations of things we have already talked about. And so we can revisit the importance of those. Let's talk about the very first one. This one came up quite a bit. It's, really the kind of the idea behind what people thought a thriving relationship is one that embodied radical honesty and vulnerability. So let's hear some quotes from them. So, this person said, I think it's just important to be honest and vulnerable, share your truth without putting blame on the other person, and hear them out when stuff comes up for them too. This one said, I'm learning to voice the hard things, which I'm so bad at. This person said, over communicate. We are always told that communication is key. It really is. Don't stay stuck. Talk. If it bothers you, talk. This next person said, communication, honesty, dropping your ego and being authentic. This person said, don't be afraid of the uncomfortable conversations. Another one, the biggest thing that has helped us to keep our relationship healthy, even though some significant obstacles, has been establishing trust and radical honesty. Another one, I have been forced to be so open and vulnerable. I don't have the luxury of playing games. And the last one is just boom, we communicate. That's all they said. All right. Tracy, reactions, responses to that.
Smart. Obviously, there's a lot of smart people out there who are giving good advice. And one thing I noted was the person said, I'm learning to voice the hard things, which I'm so bad at, put so and like 8 O's in it, so bad at. And I wonder why. Is communication something that is so looked down upon in our society? It's something that's not taught. We've talked about this earlier in the season. Like, no one's teaching people how to have relationships. And yet, what is the most important thing in our life? Relationships. And when you're on your deathbed, people aren't talking about their work life. They're talking about the relationships. That's all that matters to people. And yet it's probably one of the things we prioritize the least.
Yep. Well, and you're right about like the idea of the skills. Like sometimes we just don't know how to have those conversations. And so we've had some really great discussions, particularly when we talked about the 4 words. I thought that was a really cool episode. So if, for our listeners who haven't checked that out, the 4 words about really how to get those conversations started. But people don't know how to have these conversations, and because they think that they
I don't
can't
know
communicate.
why.
Yeah, they can't communicate, so they don't.
This stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah, but why? Because they grew up in a way that they didn't communicate, because our society doesn't respect it. I mean, that's why we started this whole podcast, right? Was to talk about communicating. And our whole thing was originally like spinning out of control, because we communicated so much that it was like, we'd just be going round and round and round. But I feel like that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to talk about things. We have these great guests on to discuss these things. And here, right in this Facebook page, these people are totally getting it, right? I mean, it's fascinating when you look at a lot of posts and things, and people are asking for advice, which I think is pretty rudimentary. Like, if it bothers you, then tell the person you're with, Yeah. And the people who give the greatest advice on Facebook are the ones who say, go and talk to that person. Like, don't listen. Like, there's people who get on, they're like, leave that person, quit, don't do that. Like, how do you know? Why are you giving that advice? You're not in there. How do you feel about it? And how does your partner feel about it? And what are you willing to accept in your life? Why don't you figure that out? Yeah. That's the kind of advice that people should be giving. And again, it doesn't matter if you're willing to tolerate some stuff, then, that's fine. If you're not, that's another story.
Right. Yeah, I know. I see a lot of things that are like posted that are like, my partner did this and it really bothers me. Should I say something? And the only response is, if it bothers you, then you should say something. Like, I mean, but what happens is a lot of people respond like why that should or shouldn't bother them. And that's not really the key. The key is you're entitled to have whatever feelings you want about something. No one else is there to tell you that they're right or wrong. You can communicate them, and whether whether those feelings are based on accurate reactions or accurate or factual descriptions of events is a different story, where somebody might be really frustrated because they thought you meant this when you did this, but you really didn't, and those feelings subside. But the reality is if you're having those feelings, shouldn't be harboring them and then asking Facebook whether or not you should say something to your partner.
Well, and it's your threshold, right? Everyone has a different threshold. So when you ask, a ton of people, you're going to get, if I ask a ton of people, what are their boundaries are all going to be different. But it doesn't matter what their boundaries are. It matters what my boundaries are. It matters what the person who I'm with's boundaries are.
Exactly.
Period. It's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, and we go back to this idea of this communication, right? And talking about, if it's something that does bother you, you should be communicating it in some way. But, we brought up this idea of some people do lack the skills or the ability to actually have those difficult conversations. But a lot of the things that were kind of like hidden in some of these comments here is share your truth without putting blame, drop your ego. So this idea that somehow we are putting ourselves at a vulnerable risk of exposure or maybe being wrong or failing at our relationship if we say something. And so some people withhold for those reasons.
Yeah, well, and that's all about societal. I mean, just go watch some Brene Brown stuff. That's all about vulnerability and shame.
Exactly. And the idea is sometimes if you don't say it, sometimes people think if I don't say it out loud, then it's not real. Like if I don't tell my partner that I'm really nervous that I'm feeling disconnected, then I don't have to validate my own feelings that I'm feeling disconnected. Like it's not real. I can pretend like it's not real. But as soon as I say it, I've opened up Pandora's box. And now here I am having to deal with the repercussions of that. Isn't it just easier not to say something?
Well, I guess you'll find out, won't you?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
it's really personal. Maybe you just want to coast along and not deal.
Yeah.
But then you see what happens with those as well when people don't deal with stuff and nothing's said. And then one person's off doing something to end the relationship and you're surprised and shocked.
Right. Yep.
So I feel like you should be talking the whole time. And I'm not talking like fake talking, real talking so that the other person,
Exactly. Well, and part of that is, flip it to the other side, because one of the other themes that came up was in this communication is this a notion of respectful receptance. I mean, that was the very strong theme was, and here's some quotes that'll support that is, Every time I share my truth when it's scary, she has the opportunity to show me she respects and values me as a whole. Another one, it is so hard to open yourself up sometimes, but every time I do, she is so patient and genuinely cares how I feel. That is such an awesome feeling, to be met with empathy instead of blame or shame. Another person said, there's only been a few instances of my shit triggering her, and she tells me without placing blame or being defensive. And then the last one is, I learned my attachment style and did a lot of healing of those core wounds. My partner has a high emotional IQ, and we approach triggers with a curiosity rather than assumptions and blame.
That's smart.
So this idea that you have to have a safe receptor in order to feel comfortable being vulnerable and communicating. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you do. I mean,
All right.
That's very smart what that last person said. I mean, all of it is, right? It's that I think there's, and I've experienced this, there's people who haven't gone to therapy who those wounds are so deep. And then when it's talked about, it's so triggering. And then they come project onto the other person, like that person's not being receptive. So it is hard to do this kind of radical candor, radical openness with unprocessed people. So I would suggest therapy first because, you know, like this person said, I learned my attachment style, did a lot of healing of those core wounds. You know, my partner has a high emotional IQ and we approach triggers with a curiosity rather than assumptions and blame. That shows me that those two people have probably done enough therapy to understand that. And when you haven't done the therapy, when you don't have that therapeutic understanding, that, okay, that everything, you know what I mean? Like, then your own, like, barriers come up and then cause problems. And then you project that out onto the other person. It's like, when you have a lot of shame and, you know, whatever, then you are like, oh, that person's judging me. You know, when maybe that person isn't at all and they're just trying to be there. So it does require both parties to actually be emotionally processed, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to do this work when one person doesn't have that understanding.
Right. And if their response is relatively volatile, you have no idea if you're going to get this kind of caring, compassionate response, or if what you say ends up triggering them and they can't receive that information, and next thing you know, it's unpredictable. And I like this idea of approaching with curiosity. There's this you know, a lot of articles have come out in the last couple of years around, you know, where people get really triggered and they might, you know, go off on someone in a restaurant or whatever it might be. And that they say that one of the best diffusing mechanisms and the best caretaking mechanism is just to ask that person if they're okay. So, you know, someone is triggered, instead of being defensive back to them, is just say, like, are you okay? Like, where's this coming from? It can diffuse the situation in the moment, but it can also just show that you care. Like, let's figure out where this is coming from, because clearly, like, you being mad that there's a dish in the sink, it just seems like, and, you know, maybe it's a little bit of an exaggerated response. Is there something else maybe going on here? Let's try to figure it out together. So I like that idea of curiosity. Let's move to the next one. This one is be on the same team. This one came up over and over. Be on the same team. This person said, we also navigate difficult moments, conversations, and life in general with the automatic understanding that we are on the same team. Our common goal is to have a healthy relationship where we both feel seen and heard. There is an automatic trust there that neither of us wants to hurt the other. And if we do, we will take active steps to do better in the future. This person said, removing my emotions when my partner is in her emotions so I can be her support system. In other words, not getting triggered by her emotions. I go into investigator mode. What's going on? I always try to set my feelings aside to get through hers first when she's upset. She's learned how to do the same things now, so it makes life very peaceful. This person says, we both see little upsets and overall issues as part of a long-term relationship, so neither of us want to run when something comes up, and that creates safety to open up. We're truly a team. Another one says, always see your partner as your teammate, not your enemy, and always try to find ways to connect or come close, even in times of struggle. And the last one is communicate about solutions and how to navigate the next time one of you gets triggered, and just trust that your person has your best interest at heart. Talk to me a little bit about this idea, about the team thing and about the enemy. You've had some really good things to say in past episodes about sometimes seeing your partner as an enemy or them seeing you as an enemy.
Well, more words of wisdom from these people. And I was going to say, before you asked me that question, even I was going to stop you after the first one about we also navigate difficult moments, conversations in life in general with the automatic understanding that we are on the same team. So I never, ever viewed my partner as being on the same team. Now, I'm best friends with somebody who I was with for 8 years. We have a great best friend relationship, and we're now like that, right, as friends. I could not do that with my ex-wife at all, and I viewed her as an enemy. And our entire relationship was set up as pretty much in that construct. And we were together for 8 years also. We are not friends, not by my choice, but she is a therapist, and I did not have any of this understanding. And it took me years after the relationship to get that. And I feel like, okay, this is something coming from a person with a trauma history, right? So I had very traumatic upbringing, and where the people in my home were considered to be enemies. So when you don't get therapy and process that first, that is how you're going to bring that into an intimate relationship. There might be the exception of people who don't do that when, they're just, I don't know, they're really gifted at that. But like living with the enemy, as I did growing up, then every relationship I have is going to be adversarial. So I'm not saying like every second of the 8 years I was with people was adversarial, but when the shit hit the fan, then I would view that person not as my teammate, but an enemy that I had to win against or defeat or not let subsume me, right? And so that was a lot of my relationship stuff was like, as soon as I got in a relationship, I felt that I was being strangled, and that comes from something that actually happened to me as a kid. So I didn't understand that until I was 47 years old. I didn't understand any of that. And that's what I'm saying about if you don't process your stuff, if you don't deal with your stuff, all of the stuff that had decades and decades and decades ago happen to you will come out. And I didn't recognize it. I'm not a dumb person, and I was a police officer and I was a lawyer and I dealt with all this stuff, but when it is so close to you, it is so hard to see. And it's really hard to look at yourself and say, why am I doing this? Why am I feeling this way? Because your brain is working only in survival mode at that time. And you revert back to what you had to do to survive. And that's what I think a lot of people, that's why I'm constantly talking about therapy, why therapy is so good, why it's, that's so different from coaching and other things. That therapy looks at like, you have to go back to that time, to those things that happened to you and understand them in order to move past them and to understand how they're affecting your day-to-day life. Because I didn't think that stuff affected me, I got through it. Fine. Screw that person. But no, that's not really. I carried that person with me for decades and let that person really mess up my life. And, that person has their own traumas that they're, have to deal with. And that's the thing is that once you can let that go, you let what happened go, and then you let that person go, totally different, way of being in life. And then after my divorce, and I dated 3 people who weren't processed, who didn't do the therapy. I had done the therapy, and then the roles were reversed. So I became like what my wife was, and then I was dating me. And it was very uncomfortable, and I did not like it. And I'm only friends with one of the 3 people who I dated after my divorce, and we're actually good friends now. And she was just here last night being very vulnerable about stuff. And of course, we called my other ex-girlfriend, so it was three ex-girlfriends talking on the phone about stuff. But I can see by having that patience and understanding that relationship can transform, but it requires, so out of the 3, only one of them is willing to even do any of that emotional processing, and not just run off or not just be a dick or whatever. So it's all very interesting. I mean, again, I just say this constantly. If you don't communicate, if you don't go to therapy, if you don't look at your own self, and there's so many ways to look at yourself. And, now that I've said this already in this season, like I'm not dating, I'm not interested in dating, and I'm happier, 10 times happier than I've ever been in my life. And it's not that I can't in the future. I don't know. I don't know if I will or not. So it is kind of interesting to be on a podcast series about thriving in relationship when I don't want to be in an intimate relationship. But because now I only want certain things out of an intimate relationship. And before I had all this understanding, I wanted things that weren't healthy, that made the relationship have the ups and downs and be like a roller coaster, and me wanting to get in and out. I don't feel that way anymore. I'm just not, so this stuff is really important. I feel like all of the stuff that these people have said is really important. So I'm not going to say one's more important than the other, but being on the same team, and that doesn't mean that you suffer abuse at the other person's hands, right? Like I see that also, where you see these people long suffering. And I see this every day in clients who I talk to at work. And it's like, oh my God, they're putting up with too much, right? They're willing to put up with abuse in like the service of the relationship. And that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I mean, in you're talking about your experiences about really kind of seeing your past partners as like enemies, kind of more in a general sense. And where I fall sort of victim to losing on the teammate perspective is an issue comes up, right? Like, so it might be an issue of, what time do you want to eat dinner? And one person says 6 and one person says 7. And instead of like trying to figure out a solution to that, sometimes it's easy to slip into, well, this is why it should be at 6. And the other person, this is why it should be at 7. And you're seeing them as like a competitor in the game, and that your goal is to win so that you can have, not just because you care about when dinner is, but now it's just a game. You want to win. You're invested. The more you talk about it, the more you have a sunk cost in winning. And instead of saying, okay, here's what's the issue here? Like, we're hungry at different times. So you can say, let's compromise and eat at 6:30, or you can say, like, what's really happening here? And the other person says, I didn't eat lunch today. I'm starving. And the other person says, I had a late lunch. And you say, okay, maybe we just eat separately, or maybe you have a snack and we eat later, or maybe
like if anyone's going to ask me about my dinner, this is why I hate dinner. Like, get over it. Eat your own dinner. I know.
I know. But like a lot of people aren't like that, Tracy. So a lot of people do have arguments.
Want to have dinner together.
Yes.
That drives me crazy. Like,
yes, but that doesn't drive a lot of people crazy. Like, I love having dinner with my partner, and I like when we eat at the same time.
But why does it matter? Right.
But my point is,
the time matters to you.
The time matters to me, and the time matters to her.
Right.
Yeah. So, but my point is it's not really about the dinner. I'm just using that as an example. It could be anything. It could be what you spend money on. It could be where you go on vacation. It could be any decision. But the point is that when you come to an issue that you disagree with, a lot of people will get into this fight mode where they just want to win.
Right.
And rather than, and then a lot of people's answer is, well, just compromise and be done with the discussion. And while compromise can work, the reality is you're not getting to the heart of really what the issue is, because compromises usually makes both people unhappy. And so if you say, what's really the issue here? Let's talk about it. We're on the same team. We want both people to feel good about when we're eating.
Okay, so when you have that argument, right? When this starts, okay, dinner time, and you're like gearing up for, make your points. How do you stop that from becoming this competitive desire to win the dinner time?
Yeah, I mean, that's when
you do it?
You shift the conversation. So you stop talking about why I'm right and you're wrong, and you start talking more about, all right, what's going on underneath the scenes here? What are your needs and what are my needs? And
what if you just say dinner time's going to be the same? What if you
you could
put in a hat and put in the times, and then you pick in, that's it.
But then neither person is really happy, and you're missing the communication of trying to figure out what people's needs are. So if we're talking about thriving is really being able to kind of have these more connective moments. And if you just leave it up to random chance and both people are unhappy with the number you picked out, I mean, yes, could it solve the time when you eat? Sure. But the point is this isn't a sustained response for every time an issue comes up in a relationship. So finding a way to every single time there is a disagreement, instead of seeing each other as this combative competitor, is that you shift the conversation and say, let's talk about each of our needs and why they're important and what can we do to meet both of our needs at the same time. And that way you're like on a team and you're like, okay, together we're going to solve this problem of creating a solution that's going to meet both of our needs. And then you abandon your fighting, you abandon the competition. So whether it's dinner time and whether you want to eat with your partner or not, I like to, but it could be anything. And so you have to have a strategy for how you go into any of these situations, not just dinner time. Because for some people, dinner time doesn't matter, but it could be what time you walk the dogs. I don't have dogs, so I don't care. It could be anything, any kind of situation. But the idea is that if you approach it like the issue is the problem and not each other, then you're coming together as a team.
The issue is the problem. That's good.
Yeah, instead of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Smart, Corey.
Well, we both have so much to offer. That's why we have 8 seasons of this podcast.
I have to offer. It's so funny though, this whole thing that you always bring up like practical things. These like, okay, my thing is all about trauma and all these bigger issues. And then you're like, what time are we going to have dinner? But I will tell you, it's interesting that you brought this up. This may be tangential, but I don't care. I hate dinner. I hate dinner time. I hate eating that's something I should disclose day one. Like, I don't want to eat dinner with you. I don't care. I don't care about going to restaurants. I don't care. I'm going out tonight meeting people for dinner and I'm like, oh, dreading it already. Cause like, I'd rather just do that. We're going somewhere after, but like when I dated someone and she would bring home dinner or like people I was shocked when I found out when I was dating people that they expected that we would have dinner at the same time. And when I was married and we had children, then I expected that because we'd have family dinner and sit and talk. But I don't know. It never occurred to me when there's just 2 adults, why you'd need to do that. So that's
a really good thing to disclose at the beginning. Right. That's really important for some people.
For some people it matters. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the next, I'm going to do these 2 themes sort of together because they relate a little bit and then we can talk about both of them. So this next one is be patient with your partner. So be patient as you learn each other and give a lot of patience and grace. So that's one theme. And then relatedly is acknowledge, apologize, and validate, which is one person said, removing my emotions when my partner is in her emotions so I can be her support system. This is the same person that said the other thing is finding out like what's going on. The other one said apologies need to be proper, acknowledging what happened, taking responsibility, creating a plan of action and change, asking what the other person needs for reparations in order to feel okay. So this idea that you approach things instead of sort of this defensiveness, that you are patient in your learning with your partner, you're patient in their growing. And then if you mess up, that you acknowledge, apologize, and validate their feelings. So thoughts and experiences on these kinds of themes.
I mean, smart again, right?
Right. So
this could go for our relationship too, our friendship, right? I mean, this goes for all relationships. I mean, this is the thing. Somebody recently was like, just expected me to know them because they'd been in a long-term marriage before us dating. And I'm like, I don't have this long history with you, so I don't know. And people are so different and people just kind of like assume that people are going to be like them or think like them. And I think that's true. The dinner thing is another example. People think, oh, everybody has dinner together. Everybody does it this way. Everybody does it. You know, when you travel, like you're going to go out, you're going to care about restaurants and drinking wine and things like that. And if you don't discuss it, and that's always a big thing, like, you know, what does vacation mean? So I feel like you have to learn another person. That's what I'm talking about. Communicating, therapy, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and on the onset too, like when, you know, I know that whether it's true for everyone or not, that there's a kind of a stereotype that lesbians U-Haul, move in quickly together and sort of assume a very, exclusive, tight sort of behaviors of a long-term relationship, but it's been 4 weeks, right? So this idea that
it's not just lesbians. I can tell you that from doing divorce law. A lot of people do.
So some people do that. So after like 4 weeks, you kind of act like the relationship is in year 4, not week 4. And there's almost this like, oh, I know my partner. We've stayed up and talked really late, but the reality is you haven't been patient enough to see things unfold. You haven't been through a year's cycle with them to see how they, certain things play out or certain circumstances come up. Only so much of life can happen in 4 weeks for you to really know about how this person acts, not just what they tell you in 4 weeks, because they could disclose everything to you in 4 weeks if you wanted to stay up all night. But the reality is how you see your partner act, or, like, it could be that you get to their birthday and that you never talked about really birthdays, and that person does not like anything to be done on their birthday, like to just chill out. They don't want any acknowledgement. They don't want a cake. And you don't know that about them, but you've only been together for 4 weeks. But once you cycle through 8 months later and they have a birthday and you give them a cake, right, and they're like, I don't want a cake. You didn't know that about them. You haven't cycled through. So not only giving patience to your partner as this process happens, but giving patience to yourself to not rush through in try to accelerate a relationship faster than it is, because then you start stumbling. Part of the beauty of it is getting to know your partner, and people who are together for 30, 40 years are still learning about each other. So why would we expect you to know everything about someone after 4 weeks or 4 months?
Yeah. Agree. And apologies. Yeah. You better apologize.
Yeah.
In a sincere way. Right.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean that you can, you could still be right, but you can apologize for all of it anyway. Even if you're right and you're right or whatever, you still can apologize.
Yeah, because your impact
validate the other person's feelings. Yep. Right.
Yeah, it could be your impact. Take responsibility. We've continued to circle back around this concept of defensiveness and how poisonous it really can be. Right? Is like seeing your partner as an enemy or a competitor, or, not being vulnerable, and all these things where you just immediately jump to a defensive response. And this idea of like not apologizing or digging your feet in, it's just not helpful to the relationship. Mm-hmm. And giving an insincere apology can sometimes be worse than giving no apology. So being really clear about acknowledging what happened and your impact, and then talking about it is important. Okay, let's move on to these next two are really they go together also. So we'll hit on these together. The first one is define the unique norms of your relationship. This is really what we've been talking about. As long as you're on the same page with each other, that's really all that matters. Those are your unique norms. You don't have to be like your parents' relationship. You don't have to be like your best friend. But 3 people said something here. They said, a big lesson for us is learning that we get to make it up as we go, that the conditioning runs deep, and being aware of those expectations that pop up to consciously move through them. Each relationship is a new work of art, and there are no rules. You are free to create what works for you both and be responsible as well. Otherwise, you'll default to your conditioning, which is compulsory heterosexual BS. Not inherently bad, just not sustainable in most cases. The next person said, we are consistent with giving love the way the other feels loved. And the third person said, asking if they want physical affection or space. So really attuning to what other people's needs are. So that's the first theme. And it sort of relates into the second one, which is clarify expectations and boundaries, which is, again, really defined based on the unique norms of your relationship. The boundaries that you all set for each other or set for yourselves within the relationship are really unique to what you want. So this person says, we have a healthy view of what we're each bringing to the relationship and what we're receiving, knowing on any given day it won't be equal. This person says, have a conversation about what commitment means to you both. Next one says, we both have and respect boundaries around communication. We set expectations and boundaries at the beginning. This person said, there's been a lot of discussion about our conflict styles and how we both approach conflict. I'm aware my partner is naturally someone who retreats, while I naturally want to fix immediately. We meet in the middle and have an understanding with realistic expectations. This person says, when triggers arise, we give the other the option of space without punishment, like going to another room and texting instead, or pressing pause on the conversation and gathering our thoughts separately and setting a time to talk again. And the last person said, when one of us is upset about anything at all, we can request space for a few hours, up to a day. But then the expectation is that we share with the other person what's going on inside our heads, even if it's messy, even if it's embarrassing, even if we think it's going to upset the other person. So really, these two themes are around being very clear up front about what you expect, but knowing that your unique norms of how you want to interact with each other is completely up to the two of you in your relationship. And it is not for anyone else to define, but that it does need to be defined.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts and reactions to these?
Smart. Again, I mean, they're all smart. I mean, that's the thing. You obviously didn't take the dumb comments off the internet.
Well, it's so funny. I didn't
comments.
leave any comments off, which is so cool. There weren't a bunch of weird ones. Like these were all of them.
Right. Smart.
Which was great. Other than like agreed or important or something like that. But nobody put something silly up here that I deleted. These were all comprehensive. Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
Communicate.
Yep. Well, and I love this stuff about like have a conversation about what commitment means to you both, right? Knowing what you bring at the beginning, all these conversations about like at the beginning, we talk about definition of transparency. We talked about it in an earlier episode this season. We talk about what are our boundaries about how much we should share? How should we give love the way the other one wants to feel loved? And like being very clear about what these things look like so that we know what our expectations are so we can behave in ways that are supportive and loving.
That's right. That's right, Corey. Preach it, Corey. Obviously, these people are either listening to our podcast or others, or they're just doing the work, right?
Yep.
If people could follow these things with everybody and at work and whatever, the world would be a much better place, right? Because the more you communicate, the more you set up like an understanding of boundaries and whatnot, and that people learn to respect those things, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah. And as long as the people who are in it agree to it, like it's interesting, you and I talk on the phone almost every day. There are friends that I have never once talked on the phone with because our expectation and the way our relationship is set up is that maybe we text or maybe we don't speak as frequently. And you and I just have an understanding that we just pick up the phone and call when we have something we want to say. And so, but we've both agreed to that. So that's just something that we have agreed to. And so we think about when you talk about using these with anybody, your friends, your family, is that we all have different relationship expectations. So it's not like I have this certain expectation or boundary that is held across every relationship. Some of them are like honesty and integrity, but some of them are different depending on the person. So like with you, if I don't hear from you via text or phone within like 3 days, I think that I need to call like for a wellness check for your house. Like you literally, the dogs are circling around you. But, but if that
how many days? It better not be 3 days.
3 feels like too long. Maybe 48 hours.
Maybe a day and a half.
But like there's other friends that I text and I don't get a reply for a month.
Right.
And that's just what I understand about our relationship. Right. So those unique norms are your unique norms.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It better not be 3 days. That's all I have to say. That's too long. Even if you're out of town. I think I communicated with you every day I was in Spain. A lot of the days I was in Thailand, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's a text. At least a text if we're in different time zones. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I will get a wellness check if it's been 36 hours.
I mean, if I'm in another country, it doesn't matter because then my dogs are being taken care of by somebody else. My main interest isn't me. It's the dogs, right? So. Okay. And my diabetic cat, but she unfortunately is no longer here with us. So she was my main worry, right?
Yep.
Once I'm petless, it won't matter. You could go a week. Won't matter.
I'm not going to go a week. You might be dead in the desert. Okay.
All right.
So we have 2 more themes. I'm going to do them separately because I think they both warrant that. And this one you're going to love. This is probably going to be your favorite theme.
Better be.
Okay. This one is attune to yourself. So one person says, take care of myself and my own needs so I can show up as my best self. Work on my own triggers, attachment, and communication style. Both my partner and I do individual therapy and have done for years. We both also work with energetic and body tools to self-regulate, but also know how to regulate together. Always be willing to work on being a better human and partner by being active and showing up. This next person says, we both go to individual therapy, and I think that is key. It helps us talk in the moment and then talk afterwards. Next person, just individual therapy. Another person working on self-regulation and self-awareness. And then the last person says, anything that is not in flow or that is energetically is strained is most likely not where I am supposed to be. So
see, great. There you go. Perfect. Smart. I mean, seriously, like what can you say? That's right. Exactly. Do your therapy, know yourself, know the other person, and give a little bit of like understanding and grace for what that person might be going through.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that each person has triggers, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're processed, you're still going to have triggers.
Yep. And we're all a work in progress, or we should be, right? Like,
right.
It's not like you're healed. But,
right.
I think about the idea of like, put on your oxygen mask before putting on others, and I hear people say, but I'm a parent, I'm going to put my child's on first. I'm like, well, your 3-year-old isn't going to be able to put it on you if you're passed out. But,
right.
I think about that. You got to put on your oxygen mask first. And it took me until I was almost 50 years old to realize that. It's interesting because as well as I do that I walk every day. I walk miles and miles every single day. I don't care if I walk in the rain, the shine, the sunshine, the cold, whatever.
Or in an ugly place. You still walk in ugly places.
I will walk wherever I have to walk in order to get in my miles. It's my mental health. It's my physical health break. It's important to me. And I've told everybody, including my partner, my child, my family, my coworkers, anybody my friends, that this comes first. This comes first because I am not mentally or physically healthy if I'm not taking care of myself. So I can't be the best partner or friend or parent I can be unless I'm taking care of myself. Now, of course, I'm not going to leave my child abandoned in order to
right.
do my
and
walk,
your child's a teenager. So you're not talking about a young child.
No, but so at the same time, it's like I have to attune to myself. That is a need that I have. So I can't show up as my best self for other people if I don't show up as my best self for myself.
And isn't it great? Technology allows you to chat while you're walking. See?
Exactly.
And that's the other thing is for people to know, do they want to take their walk and be unplugged, or do they want to actually get, like, you like to talk, I like to talk. So when we're walking, we're double dipping,
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
It makes us feel even more productive.
We're chatting. Sometimes I'm listening to my life coaching certifications or podcasts, or sometimes just music. I don't usually do it, silent, but some people like to walk in silence. But
some people do, and that's very healthy for them. I do not. I want to use my time to cram in a lot of stuff. And let's thank who are those people that started Apple? Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Thank you.
Yeah, for giving us some technology.
I know Bill Gates didn't start Apple, or did he? Did they start together?
No, Bill Gates.
But he started the revolution of computers.
Yes, technology. The advent.
Thank you. All that. Tech people.
Yeah, and but that's attuning to like what you need. And sometimes I don't even know what I need. Like I'll go out walking and I'll start listening to music, and I'm like, that's not what I need right now.
Right.
And I'll call you. Or after I get off with you, I'll be like, I feel like I need to listen to news. And I'm like, nope, don't need to listen to news.
Right.
And so it's important to be able to do that so you can be your best self. So, and I like the idea of individual therapy too, because there's things that you shouldn't have to process everything in your life with your partner. I mean, that's putting a lot on them.
And it doesn't work though. I mean, individual therapy is different from couples therapy in that it's not like, it's not that you can't process that stuff, but when you go to couples therapy, you need to know that stuff that you need to process together. And if you don't do individual therapy, you won't know that. And, people balk at the cost of therapy and whatnot, but I'll tell you, and I've had a friend mock me for like having, Bethany as my astrologer and having the psychic and all that. And it's the money that I have spent there has been the best money I've ever spent besides traveling to the Elephant Nature Park in Chiang Mai, that's money that to me is well spent. I got a lot out of it. It made my life better.
Absolutely. And that's what it's about. And you're attuned enough to know what you need. Like we've had Bethany on before on our podcast, and she is absolutely amazing. She is does astrological readings, but she's also got a lot of life coaching background. And, and if you know that that's the kind of attunement that you need, then match yourself with someone who's going to give you that. I mean, I've seen people who are like pick a therapist and they're not a good match with them, but they're like, I feel like I'm supposed to go to a therapist.
I know,
So they just
like
keep going to
change,
that same one. It's like, and then they complain about how much they don't like therapy. I'm like, you're not going to the right therapist then,
Exactly.
And so attuning to yourself is also knowing that what you need can also change too. Like I was going to one therapist and we just sort of outgrown each other. And I was like, okay, I know that I still want therapy, but I want to go in a different direction. So always being attuned to what you need and filling those needs is really important, and not looking to someone else to fill those needs for you. Because it's not Jerry Maguire. It's not, you complete me. No one completes you. You complete yourself. And so being attuned to yourself is your responsibility.
I don't know this Jerry Maguire business. I'm going to have to watch that show. I know it's something about money or what's the movie called?
Show Me the Money. It's called Jerry Maguire.
Oh, okay.
And it's, he goes off on his own to do his thing. And, so there's his love affair.
But the lady completes him.
Yeah. So you complete me. And so that's, a lot of people say, I want to find someone who I can say that to. And I'm like, I don't want anybody to complete me. I complete myself.
But you want a person aligned with you to go forward in life in alignment with you.
I want someone who completes themselves next to me in alignment. So we both complete our own selves, and that we are value added to each other. Exactly. Okay, let's do the last theme that we have here. This one's really cool. A lot of people offered some real intentional strategies, like some real tactical things. So we have them in kind of clusters here. So there were several different people who suggested different types of games and apps to use with your partner to help you thrive. One person said there's a communication tool called the Relationship Smorgasbord. If you Google it, it'll give you talking points on the areas of the relationship. The second one is we've been using the app called Paired, and it has helped tremendously. I highly recommend it. Actually, the app Paired came up over and over and over again. The Skin Deep card deck was helpful in the early stages, set time aside to answer some questions. And then someone said the Gottman cards. And so we know like John Gottman and those philosophies. Those are games and apps. One person said something about notes. We give each other lots of little notes and reminders of how grateful we are for each other. A couple people put things around therapy. We go to therapy, another person, occasional couples therapy. And this person actually said, I recommend Lesbian Adventures in Love. Michelle O'Mara is a coach who specializes in lesbian relationships and holds awesome retreats. One person wrote about books, read self-help and relationship books. And then the last suggestion for intentional thriving is connection time. One person said weekly meetings. We have missed a few, but we try and prioritize it, where we talk about what the other person has done well, what we are bothered by, and what we want to work on, etc. So these are every week. This person says we connect at least emotionally one-on-one every night, even when we're tired. And then this last one says, my girlfriend and I built our early relationship on sharing stories from our lives. We actually each made a list of our top 10 favorite stories. And then when we would talk on the phone or go out together, we could each request a number from the list and the other person would share it with us. So
nice.
Really intentional things. What kinds of things have you done that have been intentional to foster intimacy and a thriving relationship? Have you tried any of these or other things that have been really intentional?
Nothing, clearly. That's why I'm single. It didn't work out for me. No, I was going to say, like, when I was married and we had my, wife's children full time, she liked to have date night. And this was a disconnect for us because for her, it was about going out to eat dinner and have, drinks and whatnot. And sometimes it worked out well and sometimes it didn't. But I think the biggest problem for me with that was like, that's not how I really connect, and that's not something I really care about. So I think it's like, you really have to talk about, okay, well, where can we connect? What are the times that we can connect and how are we going to do it? And it's got to line up, and you have to agree, and not everybody's willing to do that. So some people do that by calling it date night, and then they go out on dates, but they don't connect at all. That's just for like a thing that they're doing. They're going out. So I think you have to be really cognizant or really intentional about it. Like, what does that actually mean? And what are you doing when you're going out on that excursion?
Right. Yeah.
Or it's going to a movie talking.
Yeah, you're going to a movie and you're not even talking. I mean, that's maybe just gets you out of your realm. But if maybe you
like the intimacy of being, but see, maybe that is something that works, because maybe it's what happens in that movie is that you're together, you're holding hands, you're whatever, that whatever it is that connects those people. And maybe movies are like a big thing for them. And so they want to go do the movies together, right? That's what I'm saying. Like dinner and drinks for me, I could care less about. So that didn't connect me, right? But volunteering at an elephant sanctuary would.
Yeah. Well,
right?
I mean, that's
personal.
That's the thing.
It's like,
what
does
connects
it matter
you
to the person? Right.
Right. You have to find out and have that conversation with your partner. What is it that would make you feel more connected to me? What kinds of things can we be doing? And maybe it is the movies, and maybe it isn't. Or maybe sometimes what I've seen though, when I bring up like the idea of movies, is like some people will go on just like a date night because it's kind of an automatic thing, and they just grab whatever they can socially to do, even if it isn't, it doesn't meet the intention of what date night was supposed to be. And so the idea is being very intentional, whatever you're choosing, and saying what is going to connect us. And maybe what connected us last week is different than what we need to be connected with this week. And having that conversation, like, I know we normally like to go to the movies, but I feel like I really want to just catch up with you and talk with you. Can we do something where, we can have conversation versus being sitting in a theater, and other times.
And talking, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking about it because it's very different for different people.
Right. And just saying, what does connection look like for our relationship in general?
Exactly.
And then if we do something like date nights, is checking in on those date nights. But sometimes people are talking about things beyond date nights on here. They're talking about sharing stories, connecting every night, doing check-in meetings once a week on how the relationship's going. They're talking about the cards thing I can really relate to. We do cards in here almost every day. I have probably 10 different decks of cards, and some of them, most of the time we do them with my daughter here too, because, I have her most of the time. And so every night I pull out the deck of cards and we say, like, what are you grateful for today? Or if you could, watch any movie 5 times in a row, what would it be? So sometimes they're silly. And sometimes they're very connective, but it gives us some talking points. And, so I really resonate a lot with those. But I think it gets back to the heart of what we've been talking about all along, is this idea that we just need to be talking constantly. At the very beginning, what are our expectations? What are our boundaries? What are our definitions of things?
Talking constantly.
Yep. How do we want to feel loved? How do we want to be connected? And then revisiting that, because that changes over time, and it changes based on circumstances. So what I needed yesterday might not be what I need today, and being able to articulate that. And that's really what I feel like is the underpinning of all of this. Yes. Right.
Is the underpinning. This is how we wrap up this entire season. Exactly. Is connection comes through communication. Effective communication comes through understanding yourself, through therapy, through self-exploration, through listening to podcasts, all that stuff, right? Exactly. So, all right. Well, I think that we have expended all of the knowledge that we have on this topic. We've taken the knowledge of those people on Facebook. Smart people.
Exactly. They're amazing.
See, that's why being in those groups is really good too, because like maybe some people don't think of these things, and that's where they go, and they can't afford therapy. So there's a perfect thing. You're learning from other people who have gone through therapy. So that's why I love Facebook, and I love other mediums like that, Yeah,
you can share a lot of good ideas. And so I totally agree with you. So thank you to all of those who posted. This was a great post. Loved all of these ideas. We'll put a bunch of these things and resources into the show notes if you're interested in any of them. And it's been an amazing season. Tracy, thank you for yet another one. And
thank you
to all of our listeners out there. Until our next season, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.